Game shows have been a staple of television since the very beginning, in part because they are less expensive to produce than shows with elaborate sets and a number of actors. They were something that networks often gravitated toward, and the combination of high stakes and the ability to see your fellow regular people on television, and along with it, the dream that, hey, maybe you too could be a contestant and win big money someday, kept the game shows popular throughout TV's history. Of course, game shows started before television back in the days of radio. And the very first game show was called Spelling Bee. This was aired in the United Kingdom live from the Alexandra Palace in May of 1938. There were only 4 episodes produced, and it was pretty much what you would think it was. It was a spelling bee. And in this case, it was an international spelling bee with teams from the United Kingdom competing against teams from the United States, talking to each other overseas via the radio. Now, again, even though this was a radio program, as it happens, newsreel cameras were present to capture part of the action of the very first game show ever made.
Forthright.
Forthright.
Well, that's a very good start, Miss Drake. Thank you. And now, across to America, Miss Sarah Hayden. Get ready. The word is verdancy.
Verdancy, Miss Hayden. Greenness.
Verdancy. Verdancy. Verdancy.
Oh, that's too bad, Miss Hayden. That's too bad. That is first casualty for the American team. And the next speller, Miss Margaret Baines. The British secretary, Miss Baines. It's still verdancy.
Verdancy, Miss Baines.
Verdancy. Verdancy.
Thank you very much, Miss Baines.
The first successful American game show was called Dr. IQ, and it was on the radio from 1939 to 1950. That show traveled from city to city, doing its broadcast in the biggest theater of whatever city that it landed in that particular week, and featured a quizmaster, the so-called Dr. IQ, who was initially played by Lou Valentine. Dr. IQ would ask questions of members of the audience who would be selected by Dr. IQ's assistants. Correct answers would win some amount of money, usually less than $20, paid in silver dollars, as well as a box of Mars bars, since Mars was the sponsor of the program.
Buffalo, now Ken Powell in the right balcony.
I have a lady, Doctor.
16 silver dollars to that lady for this one. The Pan American Conference of the Nations of the 2 American continents is now meeting to discuss united plans against the Axis. In what South American city is this important conference being held?
Rio de Janeiro.
Rio de Janeiro, 16 silver dollars to that lady.
Your name and address, please.
Cornelia Handler, 126 Moselle Street, Buffalo, New York.
Thank you. Congratulations to you as our first winner on tonight's program, Charlie Lyons in the center balcony.
I have a gentleman, Doctor.
21 silver dollars for this one. On the Liberty Head nickel, there are 13 stars surrounding the head. Now, how many points has each of these stars? No prompting, please.
5 stars.
5? No. There are 13 stars. How many points?
Oh, I see.
How many points on each star? No prompting, please. 5 seconds? Time's almost up.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Well, I'm sorry, sir. I think you'd find it 6. 6 points on each star, but a box of Dr. IQ. Candy to that gentleman.
Another big early radio hit was Truth or Consequences, which also just so happened to become the very first television game show when it aired as a special one-off experiment on New York's WNBT's first day of broadcast in 1941. Of course, that was just an experiment, and Truth or Consequences wouldn't return to television then until 1950. Still, it was a very popular show with various incarnations, including one hosted by Bob Barker of Price is Right fame, and it would be on TV until 1988. It was originally hosted by Ralph Edwards, and contestants would be asked an impossible question, which they had to answer inside of 2 seconds. When they inevitably failed, they had to take the consequences, which came in the form of a wild stunt they had to perform.
Birmingham, Alabama asks, what should you do with your old clothes when you wear them out?
Give them to the Salvation Army.
That's a wonderful thought. We should hardly check him wrong, but we will give him 50% credit of that, and therefore he will only take only 50% of his consequence, which is worse than the other 50%. What should you do with your clothes when you wear them out? You should wear them back home again. You know. Yes. All right, you haven't told truth, so you must pay the consequence. Boys, we're going to have a little race to see who can go to bed faster, okay? We have a bed here on stage, a nice bed on our stage. Just bring it out, please. All made up for you and everything. Now, look over here, fellas. Here is a dressing room, a divided dressing room. We have pajamas in there for both of you. We want you to run in there singing Rock-a-Bye Baby as loud as you can, all the time. The one who gets dressed faster into his pajamas and jumps into this bed here will win a $50 savings bond. Okay, get on your mark, get set, go, Mr. Phelps and the other gentleman. There they go. Hurry, hurry, hurry. All right, they're going, they're going. Ooh, what's going to happen to them? All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, there they go, there they go. This bed that we have here isn't exactly a bed at all. Help me, Al, will you? It's a sort of a, shall we say, bathtub. It's a bathtub filled with water, you see? All right, we'll just cover it up. I mean, the guy who jumps into this first is going to make the biggest splash in television history. Who's going to win? Here they come. Look out. Who's going to hurry? Look out.
Winners could be awarded anything, even emotional prizes, like unexpectedly being reunited with a family member who had been serving overseas. In 1950, Ralph Edwards announced that he would present a special 10th anniversary episode with a catch. He would broadcast from the first U.S. city that was willing to officially change its name to Truth or Consequences. Hot Springs, New Mexico took the bait, officially changing its name to Truth or Consequences in March of 1950. Ralph would visit every year thereafter for a special fiesta celebration, and the celebration still goes on today, and the town is still called Truth or Consequences. As the game shows became a fixture of early television and grew more and more popular, the prizes became bigger and bigger. Instead of playing for a handful of silver dollars, contestants were now playing for $64,000. The $64,000 question, of course, was one of the most, and perhaps the most popular quiz shows of the era. And its top prize amount was based on the top prize of an earlier game show called Take It or Leave It. On that show, contestants started out by winning a single dollar, and the amount would double each time a contestant answered a question correctly, with the $64 question being the hardest. That show is what gave rise to the popular saying where any hard question in life is referred to as the $64 question. When Louis G. Cowan set out to create a new big money game show, he was inspired by Take It or Leave It, but he decided to increase the prize substantially, taking it from $64 to $64,000. The show would be hosted by Hal March, an actor, and gameplay worked pretty much the same as it did on Take It or Leave It. Contestants would choose a topic. The first dollar amount was now $64, and it would double with each right answer. Each contestant would only answer one question a week, though, to help build interest and keep viewers coming back to see how their favorites would fare.
Among the greatest literature of the world are the Psalms of David. Of these, one of the best known is the first Psalm. For $8,000, recite the first 3 verses of this Psalm, ending with, "And whatsoever he doeth shall prosper." I'll repeat that. Recite the first 3 verses of this Psalm, ending with, "And whatsoever he doeth shall prosper." You have 30 seconds to think over your answer. Good luck, Stan. your 30 seconds are up. What is the correct answer to that question?
The first psalm is, Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in the law doth he meditate day and night. He shall be like a tree that's planted by the river of waters, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season, and his leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper.
You're right for $8,000.
Congratulations, Stan. I don't have to tell you, you've just won $8,000. Stan, I'm going to ask you to go home for a week, think it over, then come back next week and tell us whether you'll take the 8 you won tonight or leave it and try for 16. All right?
Okay.
Stan, we'll see you next week. Thank you for being with us on the show.
You can see how the $64,000 question used things like music and the 30-second thinking time to really drum up suspense with the audience. $64,000 question also included a couple of other innovations to keep everything on the up and up. For example, questions were randomly selected by an enormous IBM computer, which would spit out dozens of questions with a hostess selecting just one of them, helping to keep things fair. That was for the lower dollar questions. Higher value questions were even more important. These were kept in a locked box, guarded by 2 men. An isolation booth kept contestants from hearing answers from the audience. The $64,000 question was the first big money game show, and it was a ratings bonanza. It was the top rated show of 1955, even beating out I Love Lucy. President Eisenhower himself left orders that he not be disturbed during the show's Tuesday night broadcasts. And on that same night, movie theaters and restaurants lost business, and the national crime rate decreased because people were staying home to watch the $64,000 question. The contestants themselves also became a new sort of celebrity who became nationally famous household names just for appearing and succeeding on the popular show. These included 11-year-old Robert Storm, who won $192,000. Another 11-year-old Lenny Ross was invited to open the New York Stock Exchange. Spelling expert Gloria Lockerman won $64,000 and was asked to speak at the 1956 Democratic National Convention. Shoemaker Gino Prato proved to be an expert in opera and was invited to Italy for a special performance and an audience with the Pope. The most enduringly famous contestant from the $64,000 question, though, was Dr. Joyce Brothers. Then a complete unknown, she appeared on the show as a boxing expert. In this clip, as the prize money mounts, the questions have shifted from being about boxers to being about the referees of boxing matches.
First, what referee holds the record for the greatest number of heavyweight championship fights?
Arthur Donovan.
That's correct. Now, who was the referee in the hotly debated but completely legitimate Dempsey-Tunney long count battle in Chicago?
Dave Barry.
That's correct. Next, what heavyweight champion decided to retire, named the 2 leading contenders for the title, then refereed the match?
James Jeffries.
That's correct. Finally, what man, later famous in the boxing world, refereed the comeback attempt of an ex-champ against Jack Johnson at Reno, Nevada?
Tex Rickard.
You're right for $16,000. Not much you're not trying psychology. You knew the answers pretty well. What were you trying to do? Make me suffer? Congratulations, Joyce. You've just won $16,000. Now, your next question's worth $32,000. I'm going to ask you to go home. If next week you decide to go ahead for the $32,000 question, we have some books for you to study in the interim.
Joyce would go on to be the first woman and only the second person ever to win the full $64,000. She was invited by CBS Sports to commentate on a championship match between Sugar Ray Robinson and Carmen Basilio because of her success on the $64,000 question. success that she was eventually able to parlay along with her newly earned degree in psychology to host her own show and become an author of a series of popular newspaper columns. Desperate for a gimmick that would allow them to bring popular contestants back, producers conceived of a spin-off show, the $64,000 Challenge, which would pit two former $64,000 question stars against each other, now held in their own separate isolation booths. Other television producers took note of both shows and began to conceive of their own big money quiz shows to start getting their own cut of the audience. One extremely popular show that was almost a direct ripoff of the $64,000 Challenge was 21. That game was created by host Jack Barry and his partner Dan Enright. 21 pitted two contestants against each other. Like the $64,000 Challenge, each contestant was isolated in their own soundproof booth so that they couldn't hear or see each other or the audience. The host would then read off a category, 1 out of 100, and a contestant would choose a point value between 1 and 11. The bigger the points, the harder the question. Answer correctly, you win the points. Answer incorrectly, those points are deducted from your score, with the goal of the show being to reach 21, or at least to have scored more points than your opponent by the end of the show. One particular episode of 21 was a standout and a turning point for TV game shows, when, after playing 5 tied games, Charles Van Doren beat longtime 21 champion Herbert Stempel to become the new 21 champion. The series of matches were a huge ratings hit, with more and more people tuning in each week to watch this clash of mental titans, neither of whom seemed like they could be defeated. Like the $64,000 question, this series of episodes on 21 were one of television's first great phenomenon. 15 million people tuned in for the last match to watch Van Doren beat Stempel. In this clip, we join Van Doren as he answers a question identifying not just the wives of Henry VIII, but also their fates.
Catherine, you mentioned Catherine of Aragon. She was the first one. Now, the second one was Anne Boleyn.
That's right.
And, of course, the poor woman was beheaded.
That is right.
Now, the third was Jane Seymour.
Right.
And I believe she died a natural death. She died in childbirth.
That is right.
After the birth of the future Edward VI. The fourth now.
Right.
Let's see, the two Anne of Cleves.
Right.
And I don't think he beheaded her. Did he divorce her?
You'll have to tell me rather than
He divorced her.
He did. You're right. Finally, the fifth.
The fifth. It's one more. One more. I think that Henry VIII married three Catherines. Now, you mentioned Catherine of Aragon. Who was the other Catherine that you meant? The sixth wife? Catherine Parr, was that the sixth one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Catherine Aragon, Catherine Parr. Catherine Howard.
Right. And what happened to her?
Yes, what happened to her? Considering Henry VIII, he probably divorced her or beheaded her. Let's see. Well, he divorced his... Did he behead Catherine Howard?
He did. You've got 18 points. If either of you want to stop the game, you must tell me so right now.
I'll stop.
Then you win $20,000. Congratulations, Mr. Van Doren.
Van Doren became a huge celebrity. He won $129,000 during his time on 21, which is equivalent to nearly $1.2 million today. He appeared on the cover of Time magazine and was even invited to become an anchor on the Today Show. 21 was a wild ride, and Van Doren achieved a level of celebrity beyond even the greatest contestants on the $64,000 question. There was just one problem with 21. It was all a lie. The show was rigged, and it had been practically from the very beginning. When Jack Barry produced the pilot, he ran into a problem. His game was too hard. Contestants couldn't answer any of the questions, and the match ended in a score of 0-0.
Blake. I'm sorry, Tishan. I'm sorry you don't score, and that puts you right back to 0. What are we going to do with these two fellas? This is supposed to be a quiz show. It's turning out to be the greatest comedy show on the air.
The show's sponsor, Geritol, was furious and demanded that nothing like that ever happen again. That's when Jack and his partner decided to rig the game. Instead of selecting contestants at random, they were cast like actors and given the questions and answers in advance, with the whole show carefully choreographed. Contestants were told when to guess right, when to guess wrong, how long to pause before answering, and even when to mop the sweat from their foreheads. One of the earlier champions was named Herbert Stempel. Stempel had applied to appear on 21 and did very well on the accompanying exam. Producers approached him and told him about the scam. And they didn't only coach him on how to act, they specifically wanted an underdog that would draw viewers. So despite coming from a well-to-do family, they dressed Stempel in old, ill-fitting clothes and gave him a buzz cut so that he looked like an ex-GI who was down on his luck. When he won $9,000 on his very first night, more money than he'd ever seen in his life, Herb decided to go along with the ruse. Herb won the show again and again, and the show was becoming more and more popular. He also began to rake up the winnings. In fact, too much winnings. The producers told him he could only keep appearing on the show if he agreed to only take $69,500, no matter how much he actually won. Already seduced by fame, Stempel agreed. Herb's popularity, though, was beginning to slip, and anecdotal evidence suggests that Geritol and the producers were also tired of having a Jewish champion and wanted what they called a, quote, clean-cut, all-American boy as the champion star of 21. Enter Charles Van Doren, a college professor from a well-known intellectual family. Van Doren, who didn't even own a television, was approached by producers when he was applying to appear on another game show, Tic-Tac-Dough. Producers believed he had the right look and personality to be the new 21 champion. As we already talked about, Van Doren faced Stempel in a series of 4 games, each ending in a 21-21 tie, all designed to build suspense and encourage viewership, and all of them, of course, carefully choreographed. When the fateful episode was reached, Stempel was instructed to miss a question on which film won the Best Picture Oscar in 1955. The answer to the question was Marty, a terrific picture starring Ernest Borgnine and one of Stempel's favorites. Stempel asked if he couldn't miss some other question, but his request was denied. He was also denied the opportunity to play Van Doren fair and square. Stempel dutifully took the dive, and Van Doren was crowned champion. Van Doren proved to be a popular and enduring champion on the show, returning each week until his own choreographed defeat in 1957. While Van Doren was championed by 21's producers and held up as this great star and icon of education, Stempel was forgotten and ignored. A promised new television program for Stempel never materialized, and he became bitter at the game and at his treatment. Stempel managed to convince a federal investigator to look into the show, but was unable to produce any hard evidence. He was soon dismissed as simply being jealous. Instead, the so-called quiz show scandals would be exposed through another show. You see, 21 wasn't the only rigged game show.
Marie, the category, songs about bands.
And Mike took 8, did he?
He did.
Well, I'm going to try 10.
All righty. According to this song, this is the bestest band what am, honey lamb. Name that band.
Alexander's Ragtime.
Sure it is, and here are 10 connected dots for you. Okay, 10 dots are connected in your picture, 40 unconnected. It's worth $800. And Mike, our next category, Russia.
That's from a show called Dotto, a believe it or not game show version of Connect the Dots. And in August of 1958, a contestant on that show found a notebook containing all of the answers to the questions that were going to be asked of the show's champion that evening. He brought the notebook to investigators, and suddenly Stempel's story started to ring true. A grand jury was convened to investigate Dotto, 21, and other shows. Producers and nearly 100 contestants committed perjury rather than admit to their part in the scandal. A Senate subcommittee was eventually convened to take up the case. And eventually, James Snodgrass, another former 21 contestant, emerged to testify, bringing with him a series of envelopes that he had mailed to himself over the course of his time on the show. Each postmarked envelope contained the questions for that evening's program. It was the hard evidence investigators were looking for. Charles Van Doren maintained his innocence to his friends, family, and lawyer, but still went into hiding to avoid a subpoena. At last, he appeared to testify, and for the first time admitted the truth, that 21 was rigged, that it had always been rigged, and that he was a knowing and willing participant. One of the other witnesses was child star Patty Duke, who at the age of 12 had appeared on a special episode of the $64,000 challenge. She had been coached in the answers for that show, and producers again coached her, telling her what to say to the Senate. Fearful, Patty did what she was told and lied on the stand. When her testimony was complete, she rose to leave, and a senator asked her if everything she had said that day was true. Young Patty broke down in tears. She returned to her seat and told the committee everything. That yes, the $64,000 question and the $64,000 challenge were also rigged. But these shows were rigged much more subtly. With the $64,000 question, the contestants had no idea that the show was rigged. It was sort of the opposite of 21 and Dotto. While those shows gave contestants they liked the answers in advance, the $64,000 question would replace questions at the last minute with impossibly difficult ones tailored to stump the contestants that the sponsor, Charles Revson of Revlon, personally disliked, regardless of ratings or even a contestant's popularity with the home audience. One contestant Revson particularly disliked was Joyce Brothers, who he didn't think was feminine enough to be able to sell his makeup. Producers were ordered to give her near impossible questions. It was then that the questions about boxers were replaced with questions about referees, as we saw a little bit earlier. But Brothers proved to be such an expert on boxing that she answered all of those questions correctly too, as well as the next two sets of rigged questions. As for that IBM machine meant to ensure random questions, it was a fake too. Just a simple prop with the questions actually being fed in from the other side by a stagehand who was putting in cards of all the exact same question, so that there was no randomness to it at all. And that guarded locked box on the stage, it could be opened at any time by producers before taping began. With the higher stakes of the $64,000 challenge, producers took things to the next level and subtly coached players so that the players wouldn't notice until it was too late. Usually this would happen by the producers mentioning facts and figures in an offhand manner during pre-show's interviews that, to the contestants' surprise, would then show up as answers during the show. Following the Senate hearings, 21 and the $64,000 question and Dotto and all of the other quiz shows were suddenly canceled. The hosts and Charles Van Doren were disgraced. Now, no one went to prison for this scandal, simply because there were no laws at the time against fixing television game shows. An act of Congress would change that in 1960, creating strict rules of conduct for game shows, and also preventing companies from being the sole sponsor of a program and thus having an undue influence on any show's content. Really, the only game shows to survive these scandals were the so-called panel shows. These shows featured panels of celebrities who interacted with contestants in one way or another. These shows survived in part because the stakes were very low, with contestants usually winning less than $75. And that meant the shows were also very inexpensive to produce, so TV stations had more of an incentive to keep them around. The other big factor was that the producers, Mark Goodson and Bill Todman, had always insisted on their games being played clean and above board. In the wake of the scandal, Goodson and Todman became really the only game show producers left, and their shows and shows created by their former employees would dominate the genre for the next 40 years, with many Goodson-Todman game shows still on the air in one form or another today. Bill Todman handled the business side of things, while Goodson was in charge of the creative. He had a great eye for talent and knew how to make his shows look amazing on their often shoestring budgets. Of all of their shows, Goodson's favorite was To Tell the Truth. That show featured a panel of 4 celebrities who would be presented with another panel of 3 challengers. The challengers would all purport to be the same person who has some sort of incredible job or experience. And the panel has to figure out which of the 3 is the real person.
Panel, you heard this stalwart group of gentlemen all claiming to be Walter Henry Thompson, former bodyguard to Winston Churchill. Gentlemen, are you comfortably settled? All right, then let's begin this first round of questioning tonight with Kitty Carlisle. Kitty?
Thank you, Bud. Number 1, which member of of Sir Winston's family was an American? Number 1.
There was 2.
What were they?
Well, one was the son and one was a daughter, if I guess.
Number 2, can you tell me which members of Mr. Churchill's ancestral family were Americans?
His mother.
Number 3, did you ever go to America with Sir Winston?
Yes, indeed.
Did you visit Mr. Baruch?
Yes, indeed.
Number 3, where is Hobcaw?
Hobcourt?
Hobcaw. Number 2, do you know where Hobcaw is?
Yeah, either North or South Carolina. It's Baruch's Carolina home. South Carolina, I think.
South Carolina.
I think so.
Number 1, can you tell me where Sir Winston, I can't seem to call him Sir Winston, where cigars come from?
Well, some come from Cuba, yes, from Cuba.
Tom Poston.
Thank you, Bud. Number 2, please. How old is Sir Winston Churchill?
85 last November.
To Tell the Truth debuted in December of 1956 and has survived in various incarnations to this very day when it is hosted by Anthony Anderson. The original host was Bud Collyer. He had starred in a number of roles on a number of different radio shows. Most famously, he was the voice of the Man of Steel himself in The Adventures of Superman on the radio.
I take chances, Kent. I'm going to take a chance on you.
Thank you, Mr. White.
It's 2,000 miles. You'll have to hop a plane.
I'll get there, Mr. White, in spite of the weather.
Lord, I hadn't noticed the weather. Well, get to the airport anyway.
You ready, Mr. White?
Miss Smith, this is Clark Kent, temporarily attached to our staff. You'll note I said temporarily.
Yes, sir.
Kent leaves for the west by the first plane. Get him tickets and a $200 advance.
Mr. White, all planes are grounded.
That's all right, sir. I'll get there.
Take him outside. Show him what he needs to know.
Mr. White, I'd like to thank you.
Oh, let it go, Kent. Let it go. You get the story and you get a job. You're either clairvoyant or the luckiest guesser alive. Either way, I can use you. But if you miss out, well...
This way, Mr. Kent.
Thank you, Miss Smith. Nice of you to show me around.
Pretty lucky, I'll say. 100 good newspaper men walking the streets and you step right into a job.
I say, I am lucky.
You wait in here. It's the anteroom of the cashier's office.
Well, I really don't need an advance.
Playboy in disguise, eh? Wait here.
Oh, what a rotten night.
Don't fall out that window. It's 20 stories down.
Beautiful view, even in the fog.
You wait right here till I get your money. Then I'll introduce you to a few real newspaper men.
Plane's grounded. 2,000 miles to go. Sorry, Miss Smith. I'm afraid I can't wait. Clark Kent may need a plane, but Superman doesn't. Up with a window. And out.
Collier would go on to host a number of different radio game shows, including Winner Takes All, Goodson and Todman's very first game show. That led in 1950 to Collier's first TV hosting gig, Beat the Clock. The popular show, also a Goodman-Todman production, gave contestants up to 60 seconds to perform a wild stunt as Collier encouraged them from the sidelines.
Well, here's the new one, and of course it's worth $100 in cash tonight, and I'll show you what it involves. Are you right-handed or left-handed? Right. All right, then you stand on the right side, that is this side of that little tabaret. Now what you have to do is this. I don't know if I can manage with all these cards and mics and everything, but you tip this upside down and put it on your head like that. You steady it with one hand, and you take a dish off here, and you reach around and find the back leg, and you balance a dish on it. Then you take another dish off and you put it up on the other leg so that you have two of them balanced on those two legs. These two legs that are marked with the stripes. Do you understand? You must have two dishes sitting on there like that in order to stop the clock and beat the clock. Got the idea? All right, you stand alongside it there. I'll take a look at the clock, see how many seconds you have. No, you can start with it right up on top of your head. 40 seconds to do it. Are you ready? Go. Good try. I thought you had it when you got that first one out.
Beat the Clock made Collier a household name, but to tell the truth would bring him even greater fame. He was joined on that show by announcer Johnny Olson, who followed Collier from Beat the Clock. A Minnesota native, Olson was a prolific game show announcer, also announcing What's My Line, Match Game, I've Got a Secret, Concentration, Body Language, Tattletales, and The Price is Right, where he coined the phrase, "Come on down." To tell the truth's panelists included Tom Poston, a prolific television actor who reportedly appeared in more sitcoms than any other actor, but is probably best known for his role on Newhart. Peggy Cass, an Oscar and Golden Globe nominated actress. Orson Bean, an actor, comedian, and storyteller who appeared on The Tonight Show more than 200 times. Stage and screen actress Kitty Carlisle. Faye Emerson, a movie star turned talk show host known as the First Lady of Television. Enduring television star Betty White. Screen heartthrobs Donna Michi and Ralph Bellamy, as well as Johnny Carson and Dick Van Dyke. To Tell the Truth was so popular that for many years it sustained both its weekly primetime version and a daily afternoon version, both hosted by Collier.
Vote panel, so without consultation, will you kindly mark your ballots? And as you always do, select number 1, number 2, or number 3. The team of challengers, of course, will receive the usual $250 for every incorrect vote. Everybody mark their ballots? Polly, for whom did you vote this first time tonight?
I voted for number 2. First of all, most of his questions seem to be a little more accurate than the other two.
And I'm also a Sherlock Holmes fan.
Don, what about your selection?
I voted for number 2 because it was my impression all bodyguards must wear blue suits.
Kitty, which one is your choice?
I voted for number 2. He knew about Hobcore, which is Mr. Brooks' place in the South. Unfortunately, he gave a lot of information, which the real one generally doesn't do, but I still think it's number 2.
Okay, and Tom, which one do you like as the real one?
Well, I voted for number 3, and we'll see, Bud. We'll see.
He did that last week, and he was wrong.
Right.
All right, let's double check it now and see how right or wrong we are. You've heard our votes and the reasons we voted the way we did. Let's discover now which one of these gentlemen is really the former bodyguard to Winston Churchill. So will the real Walter Henry Thompson please stand up?
Another popular panel show of the time was I've Got a Secret, which aired from 1952 to 1973 and featured celebrity panelists taking turns asking yes or no questions to discover the contestant's secret.
The thing you do, it's partly physical and partly mental, and other people are involved. When you do this, are you helping somebody?
Yes, indeed.
Let us say at the time they're doing what the secret says, they're only helping themselves, but they do this so that eventually they may help others.
Is this the kind... Thank
I'm
you.
afraid of this. $60 down, 20 to go, and we go to Miss Betsy.
Go ahead.
No, I think I'm wrong now. I think I'm wrong.
No, go ahead.
At my time, you're right?
Does it have to do with Christmas?
Yes.
Do you pick out the Christmas tree for Rockefeller Plaza?
The magnificent guest, do you put up the Christmas tree for Rockefeller
No, do they
Plaza?
pick it out? Maybe you're Santa Clauses every year, in some way. Are you the head? Are you?
Santa Claus, it's just Santa.
Are you Santa? Well, they can't both be Santa Claus. Every child knows that.
Well, Donald, you got terribly close. These gentlemen would look more familiar to you if you saw them in the clothes they'll be wearing for the next 5 or 6 weeks. The secret is that these gentlemen, both of them, just graduated from a class, a school for Santa Claus.
Now that's...
You have to take a refresher course each year, and graduates of this school dress up as Santa Claus and preside over little red chimneys on street corners all over the country to collect funds for the needy. Mr. Stenberg, how long does the course run each year?
2 weeks.
Have to study 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Mr. Stark, how many years have you been serving as a Santa Claus?
3 years.
3 years.
2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Gary?
I must say that Mr. Stark has a head start here with his natural growth.
Is he going to have to cover it up? Whoever saw Santa with a brown beard?
I've Got a Secret was hosted by beloved television host Gary Moore. Born Thomas Garrison Morfitt, he performed for many years under that name until a radio program he worked on held a contest to find him a more pronounceable name. The Pittsburgh woman who suggested Gary Moore won $100. Gary Moore worked as a straight man for Jimmy Durante before going on to host his own daytime variety show, The Gary Moore Show, in 1949. That show ran until 1964 and introduced the world to Carol Burnett. I've Got a Secret's panelists included Henry Morgan, an acerbic satirist with a penchant for angering the sponsors of his own show. Betsy Palmer, a stage and screen star who would find new, unlikely fame later in life, playing Jason's mother in the first Friday the 13th movie. Bess Meyerson, the first and only Jewish Miss America. And Bill Cullen, a television personality who would later host 23 different game shows himself.
Well, obviously, Timothy loves blondes because he's been flirting outrageously with Betsy. Cliff, this thing that both of you did you do it at the same time?
No.
No, at different times. Were there any other people involved except the two of you?
Just the two of you, right?
Yes. Did it have to do with Mother and Dad in any way?
No.
All right, there's $20 down, $60 to go, and we'll go please to Bill Cullen.
Clifton, I'm sorry, I didn't hear any of your answers. I'm watching Timothy. He's catching flies over there. Was this a good thing you did, Clifton? I mean, are you proud of it?
What Clifton did?
Yes.
Are you proud of what Timothy did?
No.
All right, that's with $40 down, $40 to go, and we go to Betsy Palmer, please.
Oh, I wish I could do that, too. Yeah, I'm with you. Timothy. No, Timothy can't answer, can you, Timothy? Clifton, did this have anything to do, only because of the way the audience reacts when Bill said flies, with baseball?
No.
All right, we've lost $60, $20 to go, and we go to Henry Morgan, please.
Oh, boy.
Well, you know what he
There's a charmer. Was there anything... Gary, let's just talk like old...
I wanted to give him a little ammunition. He's running out of spit. Yes, Mr. One.
I just say, you know, you can train in this business for 100 years and bring in a charm boy like that. We have no talent at all.
Now, let me tell you his secret. Now, young Clifton here is a very conscientious student, so when he was given an assignment by his biology teacher, he really worked at it. He spent a month collecting 40 different insects.
Why?
That's his part of the secret. What do you think his part of the secret is?
ate him.
A similar show that saw panelists using yes or no questions to guess a contestant's occupation was What's My Line, which also featured a weekly celebrity guest that the panelists also had to find out who it was. But the main thrust of the show was, again, figuring out the occupations of regular, everyday people.
The final challenger, would you sign in, please, ma'am? And we will dispense with the free guesses and also the walk down. And we will see what you can do with the occupation of Lillian Saul. Is that right?
That's right.
Is it Miss or Mrs.? And Miss Saul, where are you from?
Columbus, Ohio.
Columbus, Ohio. Now you come with me. All right, panel, we're going to dispense with the wild guesses, and we'll just right now let the people at home know what Miss Saul's line is, but the panel, as usual, is going to have to try and work it out. So you know how we score this thing, Miss Saul?
Yes.
And we will announce that you're salaried and begin general questioning with Mr. Bennett Cerf.
Well, Miss Saul, I'm going to eliminate hair from Columbus by asking you, is it correct that you do not work for the Lazarus Company?
That's correct.
Do you work for some other company in Columbus?
Yes.
Is it indoor work?
Yes.
I would say, it's a matter of indoor to the degree that a lot of work is indoors, but you move around.
Do you perform some kind of service?
Yes.
Is it a service that makes you visible to the people for whom you are performing the service?
Yes.
Do you do something with your hands?
No.
Not specifically. 1 down and 9 to go, Miss Kilgallen.
Do you move about?
Yes.
Do you move about in a prescribed area?
No.
No. 2 down and 8 to go, Mr. Lewis.
Well, is there a product involved in what you do?
Yes, Mr. Lewis.
There is. Is this a product that, might be found, might the average family own one of these,
No. 3 down and 7 to go, Miss Francis.
Is the product something that is used on something else rather than by itself?
No.
No, that's 4 down and 6 to go, Mr.
What's My Line was also produced by Goodson and Todman and aired from 1950 until 1975, giving it the distinction of being the longest-running American primetime game show. It was hosted by John Charles Daly, a veteran radio and television newsman for CBS. Daly was a former White House correspondent and war correspondent, and was the first to nationally deliver the news of both the Pearl Harbor attack and the death of President Roosevelt.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, by air, President Roosevelt has just announced. The attack also was made on all naval and military activities on the principal island of Oahu. We take you now to Washington.
Daly was joined by regular panelists, including Bennett Cerf, an intellectual, lecturer, and co-founder of Random House Publishing. Arlene Francis, an actress and television host who was the highest paid game show panelist of the era, earning $1,000 an episode. Dorothy Kilgallen, author of the popular Voice of Broadway newspaper column. And Steve Allen, the original host of The Tonight Show, who coined the phrase, "Is it bigger than a bread box?" on What's My Line as a means of determining the size of an object associated with the contestant. Is it bigger than a bread box quickly became both a common expression on the show and in American households. Here is the very first time Allen asked the question.
Mr. Allen. It's a product, then, I take it, that would be normally used outside of the home, huh?
Correct.
Good. Don't know how that came to me all of a sudden. Is it a large product if you accept as the norm something the size of a bread box, let's say?
Yes, if your bread box is your norm, it's a large product, yes.
Want to show us your bread box, Steve?
In fact, the phrase quickly became so ubiquitous and so synonymous with both the show and with Allen that the producers decided to have some fun with Allen and one very special contestant.
We'll tell them what his line is. Mr. Berg, I think you know all the rules. We flip the cards to keep the count, and panel, we have about a minute and a half. Mr. Berg is salaried. With that, we'll begin the general questioning with Miss Kilgallen.
Do you work for a profit-making organization?
Yes.
Is there a product involved in what
Yes.
you do? Is it something used in the home?
Yes.
Is it a useful product?
Yes.
If you had a two-story house, would it be found on the ground floor?
Yes.
Would both men and women use it?
Yes.
Children, too?
Yes.
Is it larger than a bird bath? Small bird
Larger than a bird bath?
Little bird bath.
Could be.
But it's not larger than a bread box.
It's not larger than a bread box. No, that's one down. It's not larger than a bread box. One down, and now to go, Mr. Allen.
Is it used in the, downstairs, you say? Could it be used in the kitchen? Yes. Is there any, I got a funny mental flash all of a sudden. I'm going to take the first stab in the dark in a year. Is it a bread box by any chance?
Each episode of What's My Line would end with the mystery guest. The panelists would don blindfolds as some of the most famous people of the day would come onto the stage and try to stump the panel with their identity. What's My Line's mystery guests included Julie Andrews, Lucille Ball, Betty Davis, Henry Fonda, Alfred Hitchcock, Eleanor Roosevelt, Jimmy Stewart, and even Walt Disney.
Well, then, let me ask this. Do you work alone?
Oh, no. One down and 9 to go, Miss Kilgallen.
Are you in any way associated with the production end of motion pictures?
Oui, mademoiselle, oui. Mr. Cerf?
I think I know that voice from personal acquaintance. Are you beloved by millions and millions of children?
It's Gulliver.
The answer to that would have to be yes, Bennett.
Can I take a stab? What do
Yes, you
want?
can take a stab.
I think it's Walt Disney.
You're right.
I was afraid to use the falsetto because that's the mouse.
That would have given it all away, Walt.
I just wanted to ask Walt a question. Walt, did you check with the government and see if they needed any money lately? money he put into this place. Oh, for heaven's sake.
Now, I would like, actually, it's no secret that Walt and I have worked basically in another network, but I'm more interested in what you think now about television after 2 or 3 years of exposure.
Well, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. You get to reach people in a sort of an immediate way. With the pictures, you work for years, and then it's quite a while before you know how what you're working on is going to come out, how it's going to be received. But with television, you know, well, in a very short time.
Do you find it's a burden, Walter, over the other working habits? Or
No. I found it very stimulating.
Very stimulating.
For the whole staff, everybody, it's been a great stimulus for the whole organization.
Fine. That's good, you know, because that makes it sound like Mr. Walt Disney's going to stay in television, which is what I really wanted him to do. Walt, thanks very much. It's glad to have you with us, and nice that you've been our guest. Will you say hello to Bennett?
Host John Daly finally served as the mystery guest himself on the show's final episode. It was something fans had requested for years, but as John explained, he could never do it before the final show, as he had always been the emergency mystery guest in the event that the actual one didn't show up. While all of these shows featured regular, everyday people alongside of celebrities, the celebrities and the regular people were somehow always opponents. This was to change in 1961 with Password, one of the first shows to feature celebrities and regular average people working together on a game show. Each show featured 2 teams of 1 celebrity and 1 contestant. They would take turns using one-word clues to try and get their teammates to guess a mystery word. Points were awarded based on how many tries it took.
The password is garter.
All right, Dick. See what you can do. The first clue's worth 10 points. See if you can get Ray to say the password.
Supporter.
Fan. Supporter, fan. There are all kinds of supporters. All right. 9 points, Betsy.
Girdle. Garter.
Garter. Were you chicken?
He was chicken.
No, I don't. Who would think of a girdle?
She did.
With a garter?
Men's garters aren't attached to their girdles.
That could go on and get us into all kinds of trouble. Violet has the password. Ray has the password. As they look at it, you look at it.
The password is bankrupt.
Score stands 9 for the ladies, nothing for the gentlemen, but Ray, the first clue is yours, and it's worth 10 points.
Depression.
It has to be an English word, huh?
Yes.
Blues?
Depression, blues, it follows, but not right. 9 points, Violet.
Fundless.
1 word.
Funless. Broke.
Broke? No. Funless, broke. 8 points, Ray. You look like you got an inspiration.
Broke.
What are you doing there?
Poverty?
Broke? Poverty? No. 7 points, Violet.
Oh, dear Gussie.
She's an old lady in Kerrville. All right, good.
Receivership.
I thought I had it before you said that.
Oh, no.
Depression? Broke? Receivership? Fundless?
Should keep 4 words.
Well, yes. Debtor?
No. Receivership. 1 word, debtor. 6 points. 6 points.
All right, broke again.
Bankrupt.
Bankrupt.
Password quickly became so popular that, like To Tell the Truth, it sustained both a daily daytime version as well as a weekly primetime version. The show was hosted by Alan Ludden, a Wisconsinite and former teen advice columnist who rose to fame as the host of the GE College Bowl, a game show for college students in 1959. Ludden and Password would soon find themselves at the heart of the game show's first great romance, when he met television star Betty White when she guested on an episode.
Nice to have you with us this Sunday evening. How are you, Shelley Berman?
I am fine, thank you, Alan.
Good to have you back. Betty White, nice to have you in Password.
Thank you, Alan. Nice to be here.
What's new and bright in your future?
I'm going home for a little while, and I'm going to goof off and maybe take a little vacation. And I'm
You-
looking forward to it.
Well, good. Have a good time and come back play Password, though.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Your first partner tonight, Betty, is a man named Charles Ross. How are you, Charles, from
Fine,
Norfolk,
thank you.
Virginia? Charles, tell me, are you married?
5 weeks, Al, and the fair young bride is in the audience tonight.
Good, and you recommend the institution?
Looks like a good long-term growth situation.
Alan fell in love with Betty at first sight, and he asked her on a double date with his friends NBC chairman Grant Tinker and Mary Tyler Moore. He proposed marriage to Betty in 1962, but she turned him down, gun-shy after 2 previous failed marriages. He wore the ring she refused on a chain around his neck for a year, before she finally relented while the duo were performing together in summer stock. They were together until his untimely death in 1981, and Betty White has never remarried. Of course, Ludden was hardly the only game show host to meet his wife on the air, but that's a story for another time. I want to thank everybody very much for tuning in and joining me tonight for this look at not just the quiz show scandals, but some of the other great game shows of the 1950s and 1960s. And I hope that you'll tune in on June the 18th for a look at more game shows, this time game shows of the 70s and 80s, as we delve into the histories of What's My Line, Price is Right, The Match Game, Family Feud, Wheel of Fortune, and Jeopardy! I think you'll find it an enlightening and exciting time. And like I say, I do hope that you will tune in. I want to thank you again for joining me tonight. I hope that everyone is staying safe at home. I'm looking over at the chat and I don't see any questions or anything, but I will continue to hang out for a minute or so here to see if there's anything that anybody's curious about or anything anybody wants to bring up. I'm going to turn off the slideshow here. There we go. Oh, there I am. Larger than life. Jill says, thanks. Great program as always. Thank you, Jill. I'm glad you were able to tune in. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Hope we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. And again, oh, let's see, Donald, brilliant and fun class. Thanks for the fun. You are welcome, Donald. I am glad that you enjoyed it, and I hope all of you were playing along with some of those game show clips. I hope that you you scored well and did pretty well on it. I have never been on a game show. I've always wanted to be on a game show. I think that would be a lot of fun. I'm originally from Indiana, and in Indiana, I don't know if it's still on the air, but we had our own homegrown game show. And I think this is a popular thing in a number of different states. I don't know if it ever made it to Minnesota, but we had this game show called Hoosier Millionaire that was run by the state lottery. And sometimes on a scratch-off ticket, instead of winning, $500, you would win a spot on Hoosier Millionaire where you could win more scratch-off tickets or more money. I always wanted to appear on that. I would love to appear on a game show. I don't know what one though. That's a good question. I'll have to think about what game show I would most want to be on. There is a show. There's a game show in England, and you can find episodes of it on YouTube sometimes, called Pointless, that I like a lot. I'd like to appear on that show. I recommend checking it out. The concept of Pointless is that you work in teams of 2. And you are given a set of questions, a set of 10 questions, say, in a given topic. And it's not just about knowing the answer to the question, it's about picking the question that you think the fewest number of people, because they've asked 100 people this question, picking the question that you know the answer to that you think the least amount of people also knew the answer to, so that what you're trying to get is a pointless answer. Game shows in England are kind of funny. They still operate there very much in the same way that game shows did in the 60s after the quiz show scandals, in that you don't win very much money on an English game show. As much as I enjoy Pointless, at the end of the day, I think what you can win on Pointless is about $100, which is not a great deal of money. I think if there's no winner, that rolls over and you can win maybe $500 or $600, but certainly not the heights that you can win on an American game show. Don asks, when did they start giving merchandise as prizes instead of cash? We'll be talking about that a little bit on the 18th when we come back with that class, as The Price is Right was one of the first shows to start really giving away prizes as opposed to cash. But in the 1950s, it's a thing that began to develop. Again, after those big money quiz shows, like there'd always been prize elements, whether it was as a consolation prize or sponsor prize. We talked about how on Dr. IQ that you would win some Mars bars. And on Beat the Clock, you would often win prizes like a washer and dryer or a television as opposed to cash. Or there was this weird phenomenon on Beat the Clock where assisting Bud Collyer were a couple of young women who would sort of bring the contestants out and bring them back and forth. And the young women became popular enough that they made dolls of these hostesses that they would also give away on the show on Beat the Clock. And so if a contestant happened to have brought their daughters or children along with them to the show, Bud would usually make a point of bringing out these dolls and giving them to the kids. And as I recall, the dolls could walk, and then they had these little Polaroid cameras that would flash, because one of the things the hostesses did on Beat the Clock was to take a Polaroid picture of the people after they had performed in whatever stunt. We have another question here. Were there any other famous Minnesotans that worked on game shows besides Johnny Olson? We are going to meet a couple of other famous Minnesotans and Wisconsinites next in 2 weeks on our 70s and 80s class, but I will keep their identities secret for now. Well, again, I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in and for joining me tonight. Again, I do hope you're staying safe, and I hope that I'll see you in a couple of weeks as we take a look at more game shows, and that you'll join me again in July when we'll have some new classes then as well. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great night.